Today's page one story of the New York Times reports that recent polls and interviews show many Russians are now rallying around Vladimir Putin. Joining me now is Ivan Nechepurenko, a reporter with the Moscow bureau of the New York Times. He's currently working out of Istanbul. He shares the byline on the story, which is titled "Shaken at First. Many Russians now rally behind Putin's invasion." Ivan, you and your colleagues have written this. You say, 5 weeks into President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, there are signs that the Russian public's initial shock has given way to a mix of support for their troops and anger at the West. So what changed? What has happened?
Well, when the invasion just started, people basically had to make a choice, either to support it or not support it. There was a battle for people's minds in Russia, and the state-run propaganda was working full force to make sure as many people get onto the President Putin's side as possible. And it seems that they have succeeded so far. And many people who opposed the war, they either left or they faced, criminal prosecution, really, because people who went out in the first days of the invasion, they were brutally arrested, and many of them were sentenced to administrative arrests. So the government has clearly shown the limits of its power and went beyond of what it did before to make sure as many people support the war, or at least say they support the war. We need to make this caveat that when a pollster calls you in Russia and asks you whether you support Vladimir Putin, whether you support the war, and if you say no, and that answer might, bring a criminal prosecution against you, then I think most people would say that they do support the war, even if they think otherwise.
Right. So I wanted to ask, as a matter of fact, Catherine, go to the slide that shows what Levada says is his approval rating. 83% up from 69% in January. How reliable is any of the data? I know your reporting in the Times today is both anecdotal and based on this reporting of the survey results. Can you rely on any of this?
Well, you can rely on this to show the dynamics of where the public opinion is developed, what public opinion is developing into, but it's not reliable in the sense of giving you kind of the picture of the country as a whole, because many people just give what pollsters say are socially acceptable answers, meaning that they say what they think is expected of them to say. So we should be just aware of that. This problem existed in Russia for a long time, because Russia has been an authoritarian country under President Putin for a long time. But now, of course, this problem has been, has gone worse.
Ivan, last week, a week ago, when President Biden was leaving Poland, many of us debated the propriety of him seemingly extemporaneous and calling for regime change. And one of the things that I said here and on radio was that seems to play into Putin's hands to rally his own people. In the Times today, you say this: polls and interviews show that many Russians now accept Putin's contention that their country is under siege from the West and had no choice but to attack. Are Biden's words now being used by Putin to bolster his own support at home?
Of course, everything that is being said or done by the West against Russia now is being used by Putin and his very effective machine of propaganda, which is not a Soviet machine of propaganda. It's like the CNN, but a pro-Putin CNN, essentially. The government spends millions and millions of dollars on state-run TV channels. So they use whatever is being said, like, for instance, that Russian artists being canceled, Russian opera singers being removed from playbills in Western opera houses. Everything is being used to portray this as a Western war against Russia. So it's not Russia that is waging war in Ukraine, but the West is waging war against Russia, and Russia had to kind of respond to it. Ukraine is just a battlefield for this grand war, and Russia is being attacked. It just feeds very well into, and now we kind of see that the Russians were getting prepared for the current situation, for the current war.
The hope has been, and also from American-based corporations. Professor Jeffrey Sonnenfeld at Yale, a frequent guest on this program, he's sort of the keeper of the list of those corporations that have turned their back on Russia. You know, everything from Starbucks to McDonald's, you know the story. Does that play into Putin's hands insofar as instead of the people getting angry at Putin, like, what the hell are you doing in Ukraine, knock it off, instead they turn their sights and their antipathy toward the West?
Well, you have to think in stages. We have only been in this situation for, what, 5 weeks now? So the Russians haven't really felt the effect of sanctions, the effect of, you know, all this Western stores being closed, because, you know, there's some accumulated wealth. People still do have, you know, Western goods. They lived in a basically globalized economy for 30 years. So I think it's too early to see that. For now, I think for many Russians, the more comfortable psychological reaction is to accept it and to kind of rally around the flag, because if you do not accept it, then you have to act. And the cost of action in Russia is now very high. So basically, it's a very kind of predictable reaction that most people have,
Understood.
I think. But whether this will be a long-lasting, we don't know yet.
Right, and of course, if they had access to your reporting and other reporting from the West, then maybe that support level would take a nosedive. Ivan Nechepurenko, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time.